Hey everyone, coming up next on EXTV Live, we talk about Shaka Hislop's cancer diagnosis, Inter Miami winning the MLS, Jamaica, can they make it to the World Cup, and more. Check it out. Stay tuned.
Hi, I'm Shaka Hislop, and you're here at Extra Time TV.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.
Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of Extra Time TV. This is a live episode, and we had a little bit of a glitch there with the internet, but we're back. And like I said, this is one of those impromptu live streams, and today, we're going to talk about a couple topics as well. And like I said, it's very difficult to manage all these streams, but welcome back. I'd like to say a special thank you to everybody who has been supporting the live stream throughout the entire year and really supporting Extra Time TV and these lives. I'm doing this because of you all. What I'm going to do is at the end of this live stream, I will clip the videos and put time codes for those of you who just want to jump to the topic you want to talk about. So like I said, head over to extvmedia.com. But let's head straight into the topics, folks. Some very sobering news. ESPN FC Shaka Hislop, who is a great contributor to Extra Time TV, a great friend of the channel, has supported us from the very beginning. Very crucial in terms of how I developed as a person and in my career, and continues to be supportive. Recently came out. It's already old news because of social media, and announced and opened up about his cancer diagnosis, his prostate cancer. And instead of me rambling on, let me just actually play the clip. I also add some captions underneath for those who actually, for the hearing impaired and so on. So take a quick listen and we'll respond to it afterwards.
I have a story to tell. Roughly 18 months ago, I went for my annual physical and insisted on a PSA test, as I always do. This time around, though, my PSA was elevated. An MRI and biopsy quickly determined that I had a fairly aggressive prostate cancer. A year ago, almost to the day, December 6th to be exact, I had a radical prostatectomy, and I thought that was it. But then, 6 months later, my PSA was again on the rise, and another scan showed that my prostate cancer had spread to my pelvic bone. I started on medication pretty soon after, and just this morning completed 7.5 weeks of radiation therapy. The journey continues. But doctors recommend that all men over the age of 50 get their PSA checked regularly. If you're of African descent, that age drops to 40. If you're somewhere like the UK or somewhere else that PSA tests aren't encouraged, you have got to insist. And having a history of cancer in your family doesn't matter. I had genetic testing done, and they showed no traits in my family, yet this year would show that, without going into too much detail, that even that didn't exclude everybody in my immediate family. And now, the highest rate of prostate cancer mortality is in Caribbean men. So if you allow me to speak to my community, my people, please go get tested. Know your PSA, track its history. Prostate cancer is survivable if caught early enough. There are treatments for it. Testing saves lives. It saved mine.
So everyone, we're back, and of course, it took a lot of courage for Shaka to talk about something like that. This has been going on, as you saw in the video, for some time now. And for those of you who know me, know I'm very health conscious. I'm not perfect. I'm like most humans, I'm always trying to work on different aspects of my health, always monitoring myself. And what I would say is with this video, I have to commend the courage of Shaka Hislop. I also had some issues, which maybe eventually I will reveal. I'm fine now, thank God. But what this does is it opens awareness. I believe there's a lack of awareness and, open discussions for men. I mean, people in general, but let's talk about Trinidad and Tobago men in general. All you guys out there, sometimes we think we're too macho. We don't take these tests. We don't take our health seriously. And we react only when it happens. And as Shaka said, these things are open to us now. It's available. And you have to be an advocate for yourself. I understand sometimes the challenges. Sometimes you go in. I faced it before, where people look and say, you're looking fine, what you checking out? And I said that in the Trinidadian dialect, because sometimes, doctors are overwhelmed, the nurses are overwhelmed, but you have to take care of yourself. Knowledge and education about taking care of yourself is important. Your diet, how you sleep, how you eat. I've been making a lot of changes, and eventually I will talk about those things as we move along. with EXTV and it evolves, because I always wanted to do a segment about health. I do have an article about this on extvmedia.com, where for those of you who have any questions, I have links to the various men's health websites and information. You know, some work, some don't work from what I've gathered. But it's very important for everybody out here, all the guys listening, and all the ladies out here who are listening as well, to tell your dads, your boyfriends, your brothers, you know, your friends, to take care of themselves. The ladies as well. I'm not forgetting the ladies as well. But guys, we are, and also the mental aspect. And, oftentimes, we don't know, the psychological toll it took on Shaka. And, we were seeing the video where he's all smiles because he's that kind of guy. But oftentimes, these things go under the radar. We need to, I decided to start this EXTV live with that because I think it's very sobering, it's very important. And as he said, we are living in a time, if you find these things early, you can get rid of it, you can stop it. We have lots of different treatments now. There's people you can talk to. And I was discussing with a couple of people as well afterwards that I will actually bring, I have a couple of friends who are doctors. And I will, on one of the EXTV lives, come on and if there's any questions, guys would like to ask. I know this is a football show, but sport and health go hand in hand. And if you have any questions, I'll dedicate an entire live stream like how we had Kenwin here, bring in a doctor, and we'll have some football talk as well. But if you have any questions, we could direct it directly to a doctor. And of course, if some people may be private and they don't want to say what they want to say on air, you can send your questions to extvmedia.com and let me know if you'd like to be anonymous or not. That's fine. We respect that. So like I said, folks, this was very sobering. For me personally, I'm not just a fan of Shaka Hislop, but, I consider him a friend and very supportive towards EXTV. Would not be where it is today if it wasn't for Shaka Hislop. I would not be where I am today if it wasn't for him. And, we hope that he's getting a speedy recovery. And like I said, kudos to him for giving us, that message and that courage and encouragement to go get those tests. So guys, go out there. It's available if there's information on the EXTV media website. And of course, I will continuously try to update that because it's a new thing. So folks, if you're just joining us, let me know what you think about the Shaka Hislop video, your thoughts, how Shaka Hislop has impacted you. And like I said, let me know what you think about us possibly having some discussions about men's health. It's very important. So, before we move along, folks, we have with us, coming up next, we're going to bring in Juan Arango. He's going to talk about the MLS and all those cool topics that took place in the last couple of weeks. But I felt it was appropriate to talk about that. So, folks, we're going to be talking about the MLS, Jamaica's chances of heading into the World Cup. For all the Jamaican fans out there, let me know. I know a lot of people out there, are going to look forward to this topic. So while you're joining in, folks, we'll be talking a bunch of those things, but eventually we'll get to the Jamaica topic. So, of course, folks, we're going to head across quickly and bring in the one, the only, Juan Arango. So here we go, folks. Juan, are you ready? And we have with us today the one, the only, Mr. Juan G. Arango. How are you today?
What's up, man? How's everything going with you?
Not bad at all. There's so much going on. Everybody knows it's not a big secret that I love South American football. I'm not going to hide. I'm a massive Argentina fan. Some people try to step on that line and be all diplomatic. I like them. I'm not ashamed about it. But I can, if I need to, Juan, I do take off the fanboy glasses and could put on the analyst mode when I need to. And, speaking about, South American football and South Americans, Lionel Messi has won the MLS title. Everybody has been talking about it, at least in my circles. Some people are, whatever, and some people are excited about it. You're a guy that has very unique insight into the MLS and your thoughts on South American football in general. And, Messi being in the MLS and, his impact on the US as well. So I would love to hear your thoughts on, Inter Miami winning the MLS with Messi.
I mean, from an on-field perspective, you knew it was going to happen sooner or later. At a certain point, he was going to have to deliver the goods, whether it was this year or next year when they were at the new stadium. I guess there was a bit more incentive to win it, knowing that Jordi Alba and Sergio Busquets were retiring after this playoff. You understood that Messi had a bit more of a mission from that perspective, being able to finally legitimize, because a lot of times, well, we won the Leagues Cup. Okay, who cares about the Leagues Cup? Well, we won the Supporters Shield. Well, who cares about the Supporters Shield? We won the Eastern Cup. Okay, well, fine, that's great, but You have to actually win the MLS Cup in order to be looked at as legitimate. Well, it ended up being that way. But as you saw the end of the season play out, you saw that Inter Miami finally became focused. They finally honed in. Or you can look at it another way. You can also say that the other teams kind of were putting the foot off the accelerator. And at that time, if you start kind of easing up, it's very hard to rev up again. And that again is kind of the tricky aspect of how to manage things in MLS. That your matches in April, in May, in June maybe don't have the value that they do in September, August, and even October going into November, obviously. So I think it's that knowing when to hit the stride, what ended up being what was key for Inter Miami and for Leo Messi and company.
Yes, and one of the things I wanted to talk about was Javier Mascherano. Loved him as a player. Thought he was fantastic. I'm not 100% sold on him as a coach. He got some pretty important roles with the Argentine Football Association, the under-20s, the under-23s, most recently the Olympics. I always thought that, the other coaches had a bit of a pathway. Placente and these guys, Lionel Scaloni, they sort of did their work in the background and came in. And, Mascherano got this position. We all know the situation with the under-20 World Cup. He did not qualify, but he got in because, FIFA gave him a bit of an assist there. But, at the beginning of the season, there was a lot of criticism towards him. They said, that's Messi and friends. That's a usual dynamic. He brought in his buddies. There was a lot of question marks over his CV. He's a young coach, inexperienced, and things did not start great. We all know Inter Miami does leak a lot of goals based on how they play football. But as the season went along, especially towards the end, it seems as if he finally got his team right. And as you said before, not to repeat what you're saying, he got it right at the right moments, and he went on a nice run. And even though the final was a pretty close game, and kudos to Mueller and those guys. I thought that game could have gone anyway until Messi did his thing. What are your thoughts on Mascherano's overall performance?
It's one that you have to. I mean, for all the criticisms he's gotten, you also have to stand out. Hey, he was able to get the job done. He was able to come through in a very precarious situation because let's be honest, if Inter Miami were not to win MLS Cup, they would have blamed Mascherano for it. He would have been the first one. I don't know if out the door, but he would have been the first one in front of the shooting gallery. He would have been the first one criticized because how Messi's protected by media here in the United States, by MLS in certain aspects. He's protected a great deal. So the one that ends up being the sacrificial lamb would have ended up being Javier Mascherano, that's for sure. He was able to manage a team enough. And how much? Well, no one really knows because there's a lot of speculation about Leo being the one behind the scenes, also pulling the trigger and bringing certain players, of being interested in certain players and then coming. And that is something that also ends up being kind of controversial. But if you're able to thrive in that controversy, then all things are good. Keep in mind that Mascherano comes into a situation where he's been a coach that's failed upward. Yeah, like you said earlier, he was a coach of the under-20s. Not only does he not qualify Argentina, they end up getting knocked out in their own backyard in the second round of the under-20 World Cup. What does he end up getting? He ends up getting the under-23 job, which he also fails in. And then he loses, then all of a sudden Messi comes in, says to Chiqui Tapia, says, hey, by the way, it'd be great to be able to have Javier as our coach. He's the one that negotiated that. And well, he ends up going to Inter Miami, does struggle a great deal. Still, the jury's out, despite winning MLS Cup, mind you. There's still some that are a bit questioning, they question not only him, they also question Rodrigo de Paul when it comes to his level of play so far in their respective tenures, and despite being able to win an MLS Cup. So there's still a lot of questions that are being asked. Maybe they've kind of dissipated a little bit, but let's wait until the season rolls again and see how this Inter Miami side ends up, playing now that they are the champs, that they are the ones that'll be gunned after week in and week out even more so than they have in the past.
Yes, and I know it's easy to kind of stress on the trophy itself, but because you have so much knowledge of the MLS, in terms, I have surface level knowledge, but one of the things that we discussed in the past is when David Beckham first announced that he wanted to do this franchise in Miami, he got a lot of resistance. the whole designated player thing, there's a lot of things that are obviously very different from Europe and the leagues that we know. And, we're seeing teams starting to spend a lot more. To be fair, MLS has been doing it a while now. But, for example, Mueller, Son from Tottenham and those guys, do you think that eventually, sooner rather than later, the US are going to have to the MLS are going to have to say, listen, okay, we're going to have to be done with this designated player thing or the salary cap. Do you think that's an eventuality or that's still far off?
If you heard Don Garber the other day talking about, relegation could be an option. We've never said no, which is BS because he's actually said no. Talking about, opening up the purse strings a little bit more. Yeah, we're open to that. Well, no, that's BS because you said you were against it, as many owners have as well. Because at that point, the only ones you can really blame or not blame are the owners. And you have to give Jorge Mas credit for rattling the cage a bit, saying, hey, you know what? I want to compete. I want to be able to beat the Mexican teams. I want to be able to win. Because I remember one of the first people, I happened to be one of the first people that interviewed Jorge Mas before Inter Miami was Inter Miami. And I remember that his ambitions were very high. He said, we want to win Champions League. We want to be a team going to the Club World Cup. We want to be that team in our region. And so far, give him credit for what he's done. They're well en route to that because they've already, now Club World Cup, now Intercontinental Cup, I should say, but also Club World Cup as well. And not as the guest team. They want to be able to qualify and say, hey, we qualified our way in. So all of that being said, you see an Inter Miami team that has been able to earn a lot of things. There has been a lot of resistance, and there's still a lot of susceptibility because Inter Miami is such a team that has become the villain team. Maybe many wanted to look at them as the superstar coming in and everything was great and everything's good, but at the same time, with what they've been doing with the little corners that they've cut, and I'm not meaning it in a negative sense, it's being able to find the loophole in certain regulations. They've become the team that many are now despising, and maybe that's the role that's needed in MLS because you have such a cookie cutter league where everybody's the same, everybody acts the same, no one really goes off script. Well, you have to end up saying Inter Miami is that team, is the team that's kind of rattled the cage a little bit.
Yep, that's exactly the term I was going to use. So you read my mind, Juan. I was going to say,
Yeah.
It seems like they are the us against them mentality they have, not just with, them having Messi, but how they do things,
Yeah.
how they are, as you're saying, rattling the cage. Because, I do speak with a lot of guys in and around the MLS and USL, and,
Yeah.
it's definitely challenging a lot of the thought processes that takes place in American soccer. I still feel weird saying that, but, that's what it is.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking that one of the things, their main arguments that I saw a lot of the analysts have when they have their assessments of Inter Miami is that they sort of use the MLS Cup over their heads. It's kind of like what they used against Messi before he was called the GOAT.
World Cup.
Yeah, they're like, oh well, these guys, they do bending all these rules, but they can't beat Vancouver. They got knocked out, things like that, and now the model will with Pochettino also being in and around the national team, that culture shift that he also spoke about, that seems to be something that I didn't think I would be seeing. I'm not saying it's changed yet, but I'm definitely seeing these guys definitely using the Messi factor and even David Beckham to an extent to cause some sort of effect. Whether it would work in the future or not, I guess we'll see.
I mean, as far as effect, let's not get too carried away.
Yeah.
Messi really hasn't had much of an impact because barely many people see MLS, and that's not Messi's fault because of their streaming package. Many haven't seen. I mean, I used to work in it, and I'm not trying to badmouth it. I'm just being completely honest. I'm being completely sincere about it. And if it were working, it wouldn't have changed going into next year, or the plans that they're changing, and the cuts that are coming. And I talk about it from production standpoint, where they're going to start having one-man booth, where they're going to start having more cuts in their budget. If things were going well, that's not happening. So let's be completely and honestly sincere and saying, hey, there's things that Messi has done that really have changed the way that the game's being viewed. More people abroad are watching MLS, that's for sure. But at the same time, it's really taken a huge audience away from MLS. And sadly, it's the audience that was always behind MLS that now behind not only one but two paywalls, they weren't able to see it on a consistent basis. So they kind of tuned out and started going somewhere else. So that's something that MLS has to change in. And I think this is going to be one way to do it. Although maybe we're gonna have to wait a couple more years because the fact that they're in this television deal is part of the reason why fans have kind of been tuned out and turned off to a certain extent.
Yes, yes, and it's definitely something we'll see how it goes. Stay tuned, folks, as the old press used to say it. So just to highlight a couple cool stats from the wonderful folks of SofaScore who give us this really cool data. Messi overall, just from a sporting perspective, in the MLS, I'm seeing here 62 matches played, 57 goals, 36 assists. Minutes per goal, involvement 55, key passes 2.6.
Yeah.
His overall rating is 8.36. It feels like I'm, I don't want the expression to use because I don't think even kids know what records are anymore. So, beating a dead horse, saying the same thing, where even I'm an Argentina fan, as I said at the beginning. I love Argentinian players. Even I was shocked in terms of performance levels. I thought by now there would have been I thought it was going to be a massive drop off, but it seems as if he continues to evolve. He continues to evolve certain aspects of his game where he's losing maybe that extra step that he normally had in the past, which he's lost for some time now. His ability to change games, and there's no better example than in that final. There was a large period in that game where I thought they were done. Of course, there was a bit of fortune where, the Vancouver hit the post twice, and it took one clever pass from Messi to release Rodrigo de Paul and his assist to really change the game. So, based on these stats and overall, we spoke about Inter Miami and the MLS in general. But what do you think about Messi right now? And it will lead into our next topic. That's why I'm bringing this up. What do you think about Messi's form right now? Do you think, hey, this is surprising or this is not surprising to you?
There's a lot of ways you can look at it. Number one, you knew he was going to tear up the league. You absolutely knew it. It's a given. Even at 36, even at 37, even at 38, and probably even at 39 now, he will be dominant force within MLS. But what you're seeing, and you hear Argentine media usually after every national team match, this coming since this summer, or actually since the last FIFA date in the summer to now, people are starting to notice, people in Argentine media are noticing, how much Messi are we going to have for the World Cup? How much Messi is going to be available, because they're noticing that, okay, he's playing an ML. There were videos that have been made ad nauseum over the past 6 months saying, Messi, leave Inter Miami because you need to be ready for the World Cup. Your priority is going to be the World Cup, not Inter Miami. And playing there, they've noticed that he's dropped off one, maybe two notches. And they notice that he's slower. They notice certain things that the level of play at MLS isn't favorable for him in the long term. Now, how much, that's a different question. Maybe we'll see it we won't have that because, number one, Argentina has been qualified for so long to the World Cup. Maybe we haven't had a true measure. And if you look at Argentina's best match in 2025, it was probably that match against Brazil without Messi. So is he going to be that anchor dragging the boat, or is he going to be able to help them propel a little bit more? We won't know that maybe until the month of March when they play the Finalissima against Spain. Now, if you start hearing, or if you see Spain beat Argentina and beat them soundly, there's going to be two people that they're going to blame. Leo Messi for continuing to play, and Rodrigo de Paul, because he ended up, and Maxi Morales, is as crazy as it sounds, in the middle of an argument, say, hey, by the way, you're the one that decided to stop competing. You came here. Instead of going at 31 to Racing and going and play Copa Libertadores, you ended up coming to MLS to be comfortable next to Messi and retire, and more prioritizing your girlfriend's musical career than to prioritize your football career. So
Correct.
if that ends up happening, then Rodrigo de Paul will also get a lot of slack. He'll also have a lot of players competing for his position. He's not, at this point, you might not start guaranteeing Rodrigo de Paul to be a starter. I'm not saying that he's not going to be, but you'll have a lot more people going after his position as a starter and in his role within the national team going into the World Cup.
Yes, and I'm really glad, because both topics flow seamlessly into the other one. Because I'm going to bring up obviously the group that Argentina is drawn in, which will go back to the Paul discussion, which definitely hits a nail on the head on something I was going to raise. So obviously they were drawn in Group J. People call it the Group A group, whatever that means. I guess the three A's. So Argentina will play Algeria, Austria, and Jordan. So before we get back into the other things, I was going to do a reaction on all the teams, but because of our, passion for South American football and so on, and some of the factors we mentioned before, this is obviously a very different Argentina. Without, pretty much stating the obvious. Lionel Messi is obviously older now, slower, and, the reasons you mentioned before, he's playing in a less competitive league. What do you think about Argentina's chances of, it seems like a silly question, but in football these days, you never know. Look at the Saudi Arabia game. What do you think about this current version of Argentina and, they're standing in his group? What do you think Lionel Scaloni is thinking right now?
I think that he's saying, hey, guys, we can't mess it up again.
Yep.
Because if they do, they're with this format, not only do you have a margin of error, you do have Argentina are obligated to come out in first place. Let's just say it as it is. They're obligated. They should come out. At worst, they should end up 7 out of 9. I'm talking about the worst, and them playing poorly. They should be able to get out of the group without many complications. Now, the complication in Argentina's World Cup begin at the next round because they would end up playing either Uruguay or Spain, or if they do advance, they'll play Spain or Uruguay after that. There's a possibility they could run into both of them and route just to the semifinals. So it's not going to be an easy path for Argentina in any way, shape, or form. It's that their World Cup begins a lot later, if you want to call it that. I mean, Austria just maybe could be the team. Algeria, knowing how they play kind of counter-attacking football and very aggressive, very capable of playing in a lower block and exploding out in some type of transition, they can do that. That ends up being the big question mark. How do they come in? What attitude do they come in with? Because if there is one thing that many are starting to harp on, is that this team is starting to look complacent at times.
Yes.
And it's crazy. It's crazy and it's harsh, because it's crazy to say that because, I mean, yeah, which team wouldn't end up being complacent after winning 2 Copa Americas, winning a Finalissima, and winning a World Cup? Many would. But at the same time, it seems harsh because there really hasn't been a huge test, going into this final stretch of World Cup qualifying. There really hasn't. I mean, if they lost points, so what? We're already in. If the margin between us and second place is a little smaller, so what? They're not going to catch up to us. So there really hasn't been that one huge telltale sign, if you will, of level dropping off, because you can also say that this team knows when and how to turn it back on. The question is, will they be able to do it? And not only that, you start to see them and comparing them to, let's say, Brazil, to Colombia, that are starting. Hey, by the way, we're playing teams that are going to prepare us for the World Cup. Argentina are playing friendlies. I mean, going to Angola, and I'm not being mean on Angola. It's not a team that I would look to prepare myself properly going into the World Cup and using them, or even considering going to India and playing a football match, or the previous in September and October, the matches that they played. I don't see that as a viable option. So again, as my answer ended up being in the last question, is the true Argentina going into the World Cup, we might only be able to see them when they play Spain.
Yeah. And the reason why I brought that up, it coincides perfectly with what we were talking about with Inter Miami. You mentioned complacency as well. One of my criticisms, and I mean, Scaloni probably knows what he's doing. He may go on to win the whole thing. Who knows? I mean, we don't know. But one of my criticisms is that, okay, they qualified really pretty early. They got that convincing win against Brazil without Messi. And I did have a lot of issues with Rodrigo de Paul going to Inter Miami. I also have a huge concern that gap between now and when the MLS resumes. You know, for Messi, let's speak about Lionel Messi because everybody he's being coy about if he's going to be at the World Cup. I'm pretty sure he's going to be there, barring some injury. I think it's just a bit of a mind game. But if he does go, what is Messi going to do for these next couple of months? And also Rodrigo de Paul, and not just those two guys, the wing backs for Argentina. Something a little bit of a concern for me because the last World Cup you had Gonzalo Montiel and Molina, and then you had Acuna and Tagliafico. Acuna is now back in River. Montiel back in River as well. These guys are not playing at the top level anymore. I mean, the South American League is pretty high compared to the MLS, but still, these guys definitely have age. And one of the questions are coming up. Everybody talks about the curse of the World Cup winners. A lot of the times, not often. I mean, France proved that's not the case. This Argentina team coming in with the complacency that you mentioned, that it seems that way. Maybe it's not. I don't know. What do you think about this particular squad? If because from what I'm seeing, I felt as if Scaloni did not take advantage of qualifying early in my eyes in terms of the friendlies and using players. A lot of people saying he did not implement players like Barco, other options, Paz as well, and these guys. Trying alternate center back options. Otamendi is still in there. Lisandro Martinez is just coming back from an injury. He's trying out Senesi and a couple other guys. But it seems to me, at least, that it's pretty much the same squad with the exception of one or two players. And to me, that further underlines, I think, a little bit of complacency that it seems in my eyes that Scaloni thinks that they could get the job done with this team. And I don't think so. And that was more of a statement than a question. But my question to you now is Lionel Messi, as we spoke about in the Inter Miami section of this video. What is that Messi going to be like? Do you think he's going to go on loan? Do you think Rodrigo de Paul is going to go back at Atletico Madrid for those couple of months? What do you think is going to happen?
No. It's not going to happen. I mean, the people talk about them going on loan. It's not going to happen. They're not. They're going to go 4 matches, 5 matches.
Well, true. Yeah.
I say this because Messi and De Paul and I think Luis Suarez are about to get on a plane today or tomorrow to head to India.
Yeah, they're
doing a whole tour over there. They're expected to be at the presentation of this 70-foot statue of Leo Messi in Kerala. It's more. More of a publicity thing that they're doing over there. Huge I mean, some of the biggest sponsors that the Argentine national team happen to be from India. So that's also part of the obligation that he has going over there. Inter Miami goes on tour of South America in the month of January. They're going to, it was confirmed actually today that they're playing Barcelona and Guayaquil, and they're playing Atlético Nacional in Colombia as part of their tour. I think they might be going to Central America, make one stop there. So the money that Inter Miami is getting for those tours is under the condition, I would suppose, I don't have that in front of me, is with the condition that if Leo plays, they'll end up getting X amount. If he doesn't, they end up getting Y amount. So look, we have to look at it from that perspective. And today is what, December 11th, the time that we're recording. And he's going to go what, 3 weeks? Because Messi's not going to go jump right away. Let's say hypothetically he ends up going to Barcelona. Let's say Barcelona for argument's sake. It's going to take him 2 weeks to get ready to play. By that time, it's almost Christmas. And then he plays a couple of matches, and then the Copa del Rey starts, and all of a sudden he has to go back to Miami and start training for preseason because Inter Miami's preseason starts early because of CONCACAF Champions League. And of course, they're getting everything revved up from late January, February into the month of March, going into April for the inauguration of the new stadium, which the objective for Inter Miami is to have Leo Messi at that stadium on that day and him being the first face that everyone sees. When it comes to that's where I see. So I don't see them going anywhere because of the time, and it's kind of pointless to be able to go for 3 matches and then come back. Yeah. That really doesn't do you any good. Argentina's problem right now, I don't think is complacency though. There's other things surrounding it's that whole thing that when someone becomes successful, the more money comes in, the more problems you have. Yeah. Well, that's basically right now the situation with AFA, because what people aren't hearing internationally is that, well, the government, there's this huge clash going on with Javier Milei on one end, the president of Argentina, and Chiqui Tapia on the other. And Javier Milei right now is going full on governmentally, diplomatically, and even from a presidential standpoint, getting a lot of, I guess the equivalent would be Justice Department type of investigations that are going on into money laundering. And the name that ends up being mentioned happens to be Chiqui Tapia. Why? Because Chiqui Tapia brought in the company that's being investigated, which is like an investment or I guess it'd be like one of those I guess like stockbrokers slash hedge fund operators in Argentina that ended up being the sponsor not only of the Argentine League but also of the Argentine national team. And just a couple of days ago, every single one of the offices of that company ended up being raided for money laundering, drug trafficking, and things of that nature. And obviously, you end up being associated with them, and that ends up being another issue. Not only that, the political aspect and the political chess game that's going on within Argentine football ends up being more intense. Why? Because now Leo Messi saying, I don't want anything to do with Chiqui Tapia. Don't come and take pictures, because when things are going bad, and things have been going bad for Argentine football, for the Argentine League, is Chiqui Tapia's solution? Fly to Miami, take a picture with Leo and Rodrigo de Paul drinking mate, everything's solved. Leo's with us, everything's great. Don't worry about it. Now, Messi saying, hey, I don't want to take pictures with you. Go somewhere else. So what does he do? Chiqui Tapia this weekend ends up going with Felix Lasarte, who's part of the Trump Foundation legal team. And he's at Mar-a-Lago with Felix Lasarte and many other supporters of Donald Trump. And he's trying to get in good with Donald Trump so he can end up kind of stopping whatever Javier Milei is doing. I know I'm getting political, and Andre, on this one, but this is what's going on in Argentine football, which is distracting everything the national team is doing. And you're starting to see a lot of people start to choose sides on which side to be. Am I with Chiqui Tapia or am I with Javier Milei? So it ends up being a whole political aspect of it, kind of to an extent in a different manner, because history doesn't repeat, it rhymes. Argentina, coming off a World Cup triumph in 1982, ended up having a lot of commodities, and you're starting to see those commodities begin to emerge.
Yes, and this is why we have you on here. This insight on not just on the field, because just like with any country.
You're right, but here's the thing, and maybe you could probably make a clip out of this. Mm-hmm. The biggest problem with Argentine football is how it's covered in English on social media. Yeah. Because for Chiqui Tapia, it's great, because everybody in India, everybody in Bangladesh, they only know about Leo Messi and Rodrigo de Paul and whatever one of the Argentine national team players do. And it's great. But they never report to you, they never talk to you about what's actually going on. Because many are going to hail Chiqui Tapia as a sensational director of football, which he has been with the national team, and he's done great things with the national team. The problem has been how he's managed the league, which is basically in the middle of a chaotic situation. Chiqui Tapia, in the middle of a season, also says, hey, by the way, no longer are you having two teams relegated. Now it's one. When the tournament regular season ends, also, hey, by the way, guys, we're giving Rosario Central a trophy because they were the annual champions. What are you talking about, annual champions? We never have. Oh, no, I just made it up a couple of minutes ago. And all of a sudden, he snaps his fingers. I mean, he basically did this. Okay, it's not. I'm not making it up. Yeah. Hey guys, so what do you think about giving Rosario Central some kind of recognition when it comes to the year they've had? You think it's fine? Cool. Brings in the trophy. This is at an executive board meeting. This was 2 weeks ago. Shows the trophy. Angel, guys, come in. He had Angel Di Maria waiting in the wings to present the trophy to them at AFA headquarters. And then later on, you see Angel Di Maria with the trophy in his car. Hey, by the way, here it is. Mm. So what? And on one end, no one in English media reported that. Mm. Oh, but Leo Messi scored. Who cares? Right. This is a much bigger story. The fact that Javier Milei is looking for something to go. Just we're Thursday, correct? Well, Thursday recording right now. Monday, Tuesday, 17 football clubs in Argentina were raided by police, trying to find evidence of some type of connection with the money laundering that was being reported from Surfinanzas.
Wow.
So there were a lot of distractions, a lot of external distractions for the Argentine national team. And there most likely will be more to come. And not only that, Javier Milei was part of the delegation when he found out Chiqui Tapia was also going to Washington, D.C. He said, no, thank you, not for me.
Interesting.
So people talk about, well, football and no, football and politics are one in the same in Argentina. They're one in the same, because whenever Javier Milei goes to criticize, one of the people that he constantly criticizes aren't governors, aren't Congress. He criticizes them, aren't just governors, aren't just congressmen, aren't just the mayors of cities. It's Juan Román Riquelme. He also goes and criticizes all the time, and he has had tweets about how Riquelme is managing Boca. What the hell does he have to do? What the hell does the president of a country have to do with how a club is being run?
And that actually brought up something as well, because in addition to that, I saw Juan Sebastian Veron. He told his guys, his players from Estudiantes, to basically turn their backs on Rosario Central.
That was the players' idea.
Oh, it was a player's idea. Okay.
It was the players' idea.
Okay. I wanted to verify that. Yeah.
There was a ruling done at the beginning of the year where the champions of these tournaments, XYZ, so on and so forth, tournaments, the next match, the team has to receive an honor guard. There's a funny detail about this as well, though, as well. Because the trophy was made on a Thursday, the trophy was made up on a Thursday, and they play on a Saturday. No one said that you can turn your back. That wasn't there. And then Rosario Central comes out, the players go and they turn their backs, saying, hey, by the way, we're not playing this game. Because it would have been great, because then maybe other teams would have made it a bit more of an effort to win the annual title. It'd be great if I knew what I was competing in. Maybe I would have done more. I don't know.
Yeah, I thought that was absolutely crazy. Absolutely crazy.
Yeah,
when I saw it, I actually thought it was not even real news. I had to go verify, like, what?
Yeah. No. I don't blame you.
Yeah. It
not
just
only
sounded
does
ridiculous.
that happen, yeah. Not only does that happen, they say, by the way, you refused to do the honor guard. There was the captain of Estudiantes had his captaincy basically stripped from him, not by the club, by AFA. When have you ever heard of an FA strip a player of his captaincy? And Juan Sebastian Veron's been suspended for 6 months.
Yeah.
They said, because and all of a sudden they go and they present the document again, and people are saying, hey, by the way, that looks doctored. That looks photoshopped. They inserted as soon as the argument was going on, they inserted the new tournament that was put in. Hey, by the way, if you look at the one in January and you look at the one now, totally different. So that's what's going on in Argentine football. And all of these distractions, all of these things. And here's another thing. Many in Argentina are now seeing that Chiqui Tapia, or actually that Leo Messi is, and every time now you see a picture of Chiqui Tapia with Messi and Rodrigo de Paul, Argentines are now saying, well, Messi's becoming an enabler.
Right.
So there ends up being a big problem in Argentine football with that. I mention this because if there's a team that can beat Argentina, maybe it's Spain. But if let's not say Spain's in the picture or France, Argentina could end up beating themselves and maybe end up self-destructing before even getting in a position where they can repeat as champions, based on all what's going on, what I just told you.
Yeah, no, and this is why I specifically wanted to have this conversation with you, because, we could have had a surface level conversation and said, hey, okay, well, Argentina has Messi and, Julian Alvarez, and that's fine. We will talk about those things, as the tournament comes along. But, I do this because even with Trinidad and Tobago, and we'll get to Jamaica as well in a little while, I always tell people there's so much that goes on. And I could do the very superficial podcast where I talk about stats and data and formations only. But, I can't ignore the fact that these things affect the outcomes. And I had this discussion with somebody when we recently spoke about Trinidad and Tobago's performance. Us not being able to qualify for the World Cup and so on. I told people pretty much I was you in that conversation. There's so much of a correlation between, the politics and, people getting involved that shouldn't be involved. And it creeps on all the way down, trickles down to the players and how things are done. And we can't ignore those things. And, when you do the quick minute YouTube algorithm analysis, I guess it doesn't have time for those things. But, for people who really want to understand what's going on, that's why I have these discussions. And of course, like I said, folks, I'm a massive Argentina fan. And that doesn't mean I'm going to sing praises for everything. I'm not afraid, to look at these things. And, I was going to bring it up. So you read my mind once again. I was going to bring up the Rosario Central and Di Maria, and just things seem to be a little bit off. And you clarified a lot of things for me, because I'm genuinely concerned that they are their own worst enemy, like Inter Milan in Syria, where, they want everything. And, I've seen that situation with Trinidad and Tobago. If there's a parallel, it's not the same, but it's a similar thing when we qualified for the 2006 World Cup, which should have been a springboard for us. And then we went back about 10, 15 years because of the interference, politicians and corruption and so on. And this definitely being the defending champions, all these things. And even Scaloni, I remember that when just after he won the World Cup, I think that's just before you and I did our first interview together.
Yeah.
Scaloni announced, he was kind of hinting that I may possibly step down, and he had some conversations with Tapia, and I honestly believe, he probably spotted a lot of those irregularities amongst other things, and we'll see how it goes.
Scaloni is not one of the best paid coaches either in South America. Forget the world. I mean, he's not getting Carlo Ancelotti money in any stretch of the imagination. I think right now he's earning maybe about 2.5 times less than Ancelotti at Brazil.
I would not be surprised, because even when he came in, like for those who, it seems like a million years ago, but I remembered when he came in as the interim coach, everybody was picking on him, except it was this one guy, you mentioned him, who knew he was going to be good from the get go, but he was never supposed to be. Yeah, right.
He knew. I mean, let's say things as they are. Yeah. I mean, he's had some master strokes when it comes to the national team. I mean, Argentina was basically bankrupt. I mean, I always go back to the Copa America in 2016, where Messi and Kun Agüero and Higuaín and everyone below them on that roster were paying their way to all the matches. Okay? They were buying their own plane tickets to go and Messi and Kun Agüero and many of the others were also sustaining many of the AFA employees because AFA had no money. Chiqui Tapia comes in and settles everything down. So give him credit there. Mm-hmm. But he's also had some major... I mean, look, Argentina generate from sponsors alone over $100 million a year. It's the team with the most sponsors. It's the team that generates the most money. It's the team that does the most tours. It's the most popular national team right now for obvious reasons. I mean, you have to pay, I think, somewhere around between 15 and 20 million to be able to have Argentina come to your place and play it friendly. Okay, so and there's certain conditions and there's certain logistics and there's a lot of everything that has to be, basically, those requirements have to be met in order for Argentina to consider going to your country and playing against you in a national, friendly. Mm-hmm. The question is, you earn $100 million with the national team. How much are you spending and investing in Argentine league football? Because if you see it production-wise, if you see it from a competition standpoint, if you see it from an administrative standpoint, it's failing miserably. And that's why Argentina here, I'm talking about league, I'm not talking about national team, league, and the Brasileirão is basically up here.
Yep.
The Brasileirão right now is the best league in America. It's the best league in all of America. And there's no doubt about it, because the Brasileirão at this point could be looked at as maybe the 6th, 7th league in Europe. They can compete at that level because not only do they have the players, they have the money to be able to invest and be able to reinvest and bring players with quasi Premier League salaries into the Brasileirão.
I know financially, the Brazilian league has definitely just totally took over the South American market, for some time now. So like everything you're telling me here, it's not a surprise. A lot of Argentinian players and coaches and people all around, the Argentine league has been for some time not the go-to league anymore. Before it was between Brazil and Argentina. I'm telling you stuff you already know, but for the viewers out there, from a surface level, you would think they would be rushing. But the fact is, for some time now, Brazil, and it's showing in their performances as well. The Copa Libertadores and all these things. They're outperforming the Argentine teams. River Plate, a team that I mean, I love Boca Juniors, but River Plate, they basically brought in a bunch of players. I wouldn't say retirees because they're not, but they invested. To me, they did away with the whole youth thing. They brought in guys like Montiel, Petzela, Meza, and all these guys. And it seems like such a different River Plate from when Gallardo was there a couple of years ago, when you had all these exciting young players, Enzo and these guys, and now it's a huge thing. And maybe this is a topic we could probably have an entire separate podcast about, because everybody knows I have an entire group of English-speaking Argentina fans. They have a site called mundoalbiceleste.com. These guys are super passionate. They're not Argentinian. They're an English-speaking group, but they're from all over the planet. And, those guys would really love this discussion. And maybe I'll have them on one of these days, because it's interesting to hear the perspective from these guys, from India, Malaysia, England, all over the place, to see that, their passion for a country that's not theirs. And the fact that they want to have these types of discussions, discussing these things. These guys have deep cuts, deep dives, into Argentine football and the presidents and things like that. So that's an exciting idea for the future, Juan. So just to wrap up things about Argentina. So of course, we are seeing outside the tactical aspects and looking at the squad and how things are going in. Do you think, in terms of the incorporation of younger players? Because we know it's kind of lazy to ask you if you think they're going to retain the World Cup, because that's a difficult question. It's very difficult to do. Statistically, the odds are against them in that, in that perspective. So I'm not going to even ask that question. We'll see how it goes. Can they do it? Yes. But what I would like to ask, has Scaloni done enough to incorporate newer players into the squad in terms of Paz and in the wing backs and center back positions? Or do you think perhaps, I know you said complacency is not an issue, but do you think he did enough? Because the World Cup is just a couple of months away. I would even say weeks, if you count, the preparations and so on, and the pre-tournament friendlies. Do you think he did enough to really evolve the squad? Because, I'll use an example. I said the World Cup curse before. Italy 2010, complete disaster, in the group stage. Lippi, great coach, experienced coach, brought in guys on paper. When you look at that Italian squad, on paper, these guys were top players at the time still. And, they washed out in the first round. Spain, I was looking at the highlights last night. I don't know why it came up in my algorithm. Del Bosque, great coach. I love him. The squad, I looked at the squad. It was a pretty decent squad. But, you had Xavi, Iniesta, and these guys, they were still pretty much, I won't say prime, but they were still in good form. Xavi Alonso, all these guys. Massively flopped at the 2014 World Cup. We all saw that game against the Netherlands. France was an exception in this case. And, but what do you think? Do you think Germany as well? That's the third team I was trying to remember. Yeah. They won the 2014 World Cup. Look what's going on with them. Do you think that is a real possibility for Argentina this time around? Or do you think they have enough? Scaloni is smart enough to navigate that?
The players collectively are smart enough to navigate that, to be honest with you. The Saudi Arabia loss maybe did more good than harm to Argentina. Because anytime that there's something that goes on within the national team, Scaloni always points in that direction. Guys, you have to be sharp all the time. If not, we're going to have another Saudi Arabia moment.
Right.
He keeps that as a reference. I mean, you have a coach that's very centered, that's very grounded. He doesn't go off, he doesn't have this sense of grandeur. He understands his role. He understands how the players have to play. He knows that the players have to be in the best form possible. But regarding younger players, maybe you could look at Thiago Almada has become a bit more of a reference point, especially since Di Maria retired. The question in that is, would Nico Paz be getting more time? Should Leo Messi be more of a limited option? And when I say limited in minutes, maybe he comes in off the bench. Maybe he starts and plays 60 minutes. And then who comes in? So you start looking at it from that perspective as well. maybe you start looking at some of the under 20s. Maybe you start looking at a Julio Soler. Maybe, and he's been getting, Franco Mastantuono was able to get some looks, but not playing at Real Madrid doesn't help you much. All this in the question, I guess the short answer could end up being yes, but it depends in different positions who's available. Do you have someone else instead of Gonzalo Montiel at the right back position? Do you have someone like Marcos Acuna? I don't think Marcos Acuna can play anymore with the national team. Just always injured. A little bit more combative in the negative sense, and that's kind of hindered him much more. Nicolas Tagliafico would probably end up being the starter again at left back. But underneath them, who do you have? Is Julio Soler going to be a good option going forward? I don't know. So yeah, you might have a sprinkling of youth players, but the thing with Argentina is that if you look position per position, position by position, you end up seeing a team that's still relatively young. It's not a veteran late inside. Okay, Messi's 39. I give you that. De Paul's 31. Okay, I'll give you that. But you still have players in their mid to late 20s in 2026 going into 2030. They'll be pretty much hitting either the peak or they are in the middle of the peak of their careers. So you do have that changeover going on as we speak.
Yeah, and that the reason why I asked that, once again, you read my mind. I said that 3 times in this video, folks.
Mm-hmm.
I was just going to specifically ask, sometimes we do overuse the phrase, changing of cycles. And I did identify in a thing I wrote up on extvmedia.com. You all can check it out. One of the key strengths in addition to the tactics and so on was that the core of this Argentina group, with the exception of Messi, De Paul, and Otamendi, this is after the Copa America, is that they have a pretty core, strong young core that in my mind has about, a four-year cycle, maybe more. Enzo, McAllister, those guys are, engines. You have Almada coming in there, Julian Alvarez, Lautaro. These guys, some people would argue in the old days are approaching their peak years. Dibu Martinez, goalkeepers, of course, can go way to their 30s, whatever. It's age is not really much of an issue for these guys. And barring 1 or 2 positions, I made the argument that, while I could state all the arguments why there's reasons why they can't retain the World Cup, which is history, stats it's not favorable on, teams winning back-to-back World Cups. The possibility is always there of complacency for the cases I mentioned before with the last 3 of the last 4 World Cup winners, flopping really hard. I do think that Scaloni, in my mind, and this is me agreeing with you, Scaloni mentioned in one of those Netflix interviews the Saudi Arabia thing. And I remember seeing him when Brazil got eliminated from the last World Cup. The Argentine players were celebrating and he was furious. And he's like, "What are you guys celebrating?" That's something. I think it's we often talk about Messi. It's easy to talk about Messi and all these other guys, but I think Scaloni, for me, Scaloni is the key. While I did express some doubts about his implementation of younger players, in my mind, and you could tell me if you agree or disagree, I think Scaloni, in a lot of ways, you answered my question already. Scaloni is that level-headed guy. I can't see Scaloni being that guy who's complacent. I could see Scaloni sitting down and being like, okay, keep these guys on their toes. Yeah.
He's even said it.
Yeah.
For me to be complacent, why remain with the national team? I can go home to Mallorca and be complacent.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
people forget
that.
He
said it. It's not something that has not been said. I mean, he knows and he's very aware of that. Mm-hmm. Now, will people be disappointed if they don't win the World Cup? Yeah, of course they will be. But the fact that they've already won one kind of taper
pressure off.
It takes a lot of pressure off. Maybe you end up seeing Argentina in their best version without Messi.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows?
And I think so as well. Just to end off this topic, I know I said I was not going to ask this, and I completely am contradicting myself. But realistically, the World Cup, your honest opinion, how do you think Argentina is going to do?
Argentina's going to do. They should at least get to semis.
Mm-hmm.
At least. It's still, they're still the team to beat. We can try and punch holes in their respective argument, but they're still one of the strongest teams, if not the strongest. Maybe Spain has something to say about that, but we could also start punching holes in Spain's argument as well. So, I mean, you don't have a team that's so overwhelmingly favored in this tournament coming in that it's a very impossible. It's not like going into the 1970 World Cup and saying, oh, I don't think Brazil's going to win the World Cup. No,
Yeah.
you have a very even field, so distributed to a point where, I mean, try and look at the group stages and tell me if there's more than 4 matches that you're kind of like totally into. Okay, I'll give you 5. Look at them. So for teams like Argentina, teams like Brazil, teams like Portugal, Spain, I'll even throw in England, who's also looked at it as a possible candidate. Their World Cup doesn't start maybe until the round of 32.
Correct.
It really doesn't start there. But they know that how they end up in the group stage can have a direct impact on everything else or who they end up facing. I mean, would you want to end up, fine, you overestimate your rivals, you end up in 3rd place, and all of a sudden Argentina comes out of the gate. Oh, by the way, you play Spain. Do you want to start out that way? No. You want to end up playing the teams when you have to play them. Although you know that as a team that's defending a title, you have to play everyone that's ahead of you. But you'd rather play Spain in the semis than play them in the second round. That's very obvious. So we shall see.
Yes. And folks, you can let us know what you think in the comment section below. What do you think about this particular group? I mentioned this group because, like I said, I'm unapologetically not going to hide the fact that I'm an Argentina fan. So I'm obviously going to show a little bit of bias as to what's speaking about this group first. Of course, if Trinidad and Tobago was in there, I would have spoken about that group. But, jumping across to CONCACAF, you have a lot of love for Jamaica. I know that, with your time, you're doing a lot of work at Sportsmax and those guys. We had Lance Whitaker on during the qualifiers, which was great. This, your buddy. And, he gave us some insight, which coincides with a lot of what you were talking about before we started recording. Steve McLaren is gone. Jamaica did not qualify directly. They're in the playoff spot, which is not as simple as people thought it would be. A lot of people surprisingly didn't know, it's literally, a bunch of games. It's not like a one-off game in the past. It's an actual mini tournament. But it's pretty much 2 games in a lot of ways. First off, I would love to hear your thoughts. You are one of those people and you deserve credit for this, for highlighting from the very beginning. You weren't very pleased with Steve McLaren, being hired as a Jamaican coach. You didn't see it as a right fit. And, you are vindicated in your stance now. So now that Steve McLaren has walked away, what are your thoughts on his overall performance and also his replacement? I don't know if I'm pronouncing this correctly. Rudolph Speed, is that his? He stepped in. I did my little bit of research, and so a lot of people have mixed feelings about him. They're not huge fans from my research. But let's hear your thoughts. You have way more insight than I do.
Actually, Rudolph Spiel basically hired himself, didn't he?
No, yeah.
And who did he hire?
Oh, that's right.
There you go. Look, first and foremost, and I'm very clear on what I said in Sportsmax, and I remember it. Steve McLaren couldn't get England into the Euros. Period. He hadn't been coaching in over 5-6 years. Period. Yeah, people say Manchester, but he wasn't. I mean, he wasn't coaching Manchester United. He was in the mix. He was one of the assistants / advisors, whatever. When was the last time Steve McLaren had any relevance as far as coaching? Well, yeah, when he coached England and England didn't make the Euros. He was a coach that, and again, there's this huge obsession in the Caribbean with English coaches or anything that's English. That's got to change if they want to go somewhere. Jamaica's best moment wasn't with an English coach. It was with a Brazilian coach. Trinidad's best moment. Trinidad's best moment wasn't with an English coach. It was a Lil Ben Hacker. You can question him and you can think he's super conservative, whatever, but they were able to do it. Jamaica, and again, this is not a slight at Dwight York or any I mean, who better to coach Trinidad than Dwight York, because he knows the idiosyncrasy of the Trinidadian player. Well, Jamaica needs someone that can understand. I'm not saying someone that understands, because if not, I'm saying, hey, Tappa Whitmore, come back for a 4th time. where you have to have a coach that comes in and says, okay, how do you guys play? How does Jamaica? And I asked this question in studio. I remember, okay, how does Jamaica play? Silence.
Yep.
There is no style. But there is an identity that the Jamaican footballer has. And where do you find that? You have to go do some grassroots work, seeing how Jamaicans play on the street, how they play on their pitches, how they play and how their pitches are, and how they're able to adapt to those conditions. Based on that, then you can understand how the Jamaican player plays or can play. Okay, now knowing that, I can establish an identity in which I can have Jamaican players play and play to their strengths, not try and remold them into something they're not. And have options. Again, I could give you quite a few examples of Jamaica in this last World Cup qualifying cycle where you saw Steve McLaren being Steve McLaren, because it's all great when you're winning, when you're beating Bermuda 7-0. That's perfect. That's sensational. But when you're not able to get past Trinidad, when you're not able to get past Curacao, and I mean, they didn't lose that first place because of how they did against Curacao. They lost them what they weren't able to do against Trinidad. They had the lead, and Trinidad equalized in the end. How did that end up happening? So Steve McLaren didn't adjust well to be able to establish themselves more defensively. Against Curacao, there was no idea. There was no football being played. Curacao played their style, and it came through in that match. But you don't have that. You don't have that when it comes to Steve McLaren. I didn't see him with a lot of ideas that made him different to his predecessors. There just wasn't. Yeah, that he can speak in English and said a couple of curse words in patois. Oh, great. You know, that's all for the cameras. But when the cameras are off, what work did he do? Now, let me give you credit. Let me give him credit on one thing. He recruited like no one could recruit. He brought a lot of players in that did raise the level for Jamaica. But as soon as they came in, they thought that they had this entitlement of, hey, I have to play, I have to do this. And I mean, one player that I was extremely impressed with, especially towards the end, was with Ian Frey. In the match against Trinidad match, right? I'm trying to remember. Oh, no, the match against Curacao.
Yeah.
I liked how he played. He was probably one of the only players for Jamaica that I could say, hey, man, you know, he played pretty well. He played very well, and he was debuting in that match. So if your debutant is the one that's playing the best, what does that say about the rest? And those adjustments, who had to make them? It wasn't Steve McLaren.
Wow. And the thing is, just to add to that, you know, a lot of people outside yourself, myself included, I mean, I didn't say anything, but, you know, it always seemed like a square peg, round hole scenario where, you know, anybody who followed football, you mentioned, you know, England not qualifying. To me, the last time that he had, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, any sort of success, and that was a while back. And I use the word success with a grain of salt. Was it with Middlesbrough, I think? I can't remember what team it was. Yeah, that was a while back in there. And even then, you know, that's a stretch. You know, it's not like he had massive success. And I'm not saying he has to be like a Champions League winning coach, but, you know, I would even say, you know, like I questioned at the time, you know, the Jamaican federations, you know, they have this large pool of players, exciting group of players. So much so that sometimes some players are not even playing. The players we saw are not even the strongest Jamaican team. Where players, you know, players like Leon Bailey, you know, who, you know, he mentions his problems with the Jamaican football team all the time. And even then, that's not even a concern because, hey, we have other guys as well. That's a luxury Trinidad wish they had right now. And, you know, to see in our eyes, like, you know, we did a lot of live streams. And I want to say a special in the middle of this shout out to all the Jamaican fans. They were massively supportive with the live streams. You know, we took the live stream to the watch alongs to like 16, 17,000 engaged viewers, and a lot of love was from Jamaica. And so I really appreciate that. So I just wanted to mention that while we're doing this. And that's why I'm even more passionate about it, because it seems like such a waste because, okay, I'm from Trinidad and Tobago. We're not going to make it to the World Cup, but obviously it'll be nice for our region, you know, for Jamaica to get back in there, get the, you know, the CFU, although we're part of CONCACAF, but get the, you know, one of those Caribbean teams back in there outside Curacao. But, you know, Jamaica and Trinidad, in a lot of ways connected in a lot of ways to see Jamaica back in there and to see such a powerful team being squandered and not being utilized in the way they did. And Lance mentioned this. Lance said pretty much what you said in his way, that he was not very confident, and he was optimistic if we'd get a draw, and he was spot on. And he mentioned similar reasons to you as well. And now that we have the new coach in there and the playoff, because Jamaica, they have to play New Caledonia, which I admittedly did not know much about, but I did my research, and that's not exactly a walkover. On paper, Jamaica, on paper, we all know the saying about on paper, Jamaica should get past them, but that's not how football works, especially with how things are going. So do you think with the small gap between, Steve McLaren's absence and now it's enough to galvanize his team? Do you think this coach is the right guy to get them to get past this qualifying round and get them to the World Cup? Do you think he's the man?
No, I don't. I mean, maybe things. I mean, Jamaica have probably better players than New Caledonia, but the problem's not there. They have to play
Congo.
Congo. Yeah, they have to play Democratic Republic of Congo, a team that you look at that ended up knocking out Nigeria from the World Cup. So you're not basically, let's get rid of this rinky dink team and now we're on our way. No, you have a harder way to have a much harder opponent in that second match. So absolutely, it's very difficult at this point. It's very difficult, and not only that, to see how Jamaica do come back after a month of November where they were extremely disappointed. Seeing how that lags over into that intercontinental playoff. I have my doubts. I seriously have my doubts, and the worst part about it all is if Jamaica couldn't qualify with 48 teams, what's that really saying about the state of the game in Jamaica?
Yep. And it echoes a sentiment I have with Trinidad and Tobago football, because the reason why I'm paying so much attention to this bracket is because at one point in time I was entertaining Trinidad and Tobago coming second in the group, which we didn't. That's a whole other story. We'll talk about that another time. But I saw the potential pathway for us, and I was telling a lot of people, and it kind of shocked me. A lot of journalists within our fraternity in Trinidad and Tobago. It's not 2006 World Cup where we had to play Bahrain. This upcoming nation who are kind of just getting into the groove of things. These are, like in the other bracket, you have teams like Bolivia, and then and Suriname, and whoever wins that game, they have to play Iran. These are strong teams. And this is one, and I mentioned this about Trinidad and Tobago, and I'll use the same for Jamaica, as you said. And Jamaica is further along in terms of the development with their player pool. And if they can't get in to a 48-team World Cup where you didn't have to play the quote-unquote big boys in the hex in the traditional sense. You didn't have to play USA, Mexico. Look at Costa Rica, didn't make it. But those sort of teams, to me, if you can't make it then, that's a scary fact that both, I'm shoehorning Trinidad into this conversation, but it's kind of the same narrative. It's a scary conversation to have. Now, Trinidad has their pre-made excuses. We survived corruption all these years, and there's a change in administration, and just like what we spoke about with the Argentine topic before, every country has their thing, and the one thing Jamaica has going for them is that they have a massive pool, which I mentioned repeatedly in this particular topic, and if they can't get the decisions right to get the right coach in there and get things in order to get it done now, when will they get it right? That to me, that's the question I ask, because to me,
that's a huge question.
Yeah.
And there's no doubt about it.
Yeah, and Lance mentioned this. He says sometimes, Jamaican fans, like most fans, but the Jamaican fans are very demanding. And he pretty much, said what you said. When we were talking about the last game against Curacao, he mentioned, the fans, because they are demanding, they will turn on the team if they need to, if they think they're not performing well. And I agree with them. I think the expectation for Jamaica should be really high, and I think it's such a shame, such a exciting talent pool of players in my eyes are going to waste.
Yeah, you're right. But I mean, I even said it as well. I said at the same time I'm saying all this, Jamaica should qualify for the World Cup. They should. But nobody said how. And to me, that's even worse because, okay, fine, we're in second place. We still have a shot at making the World Cup. Steve McLaren could have stayed on board if he wanted to. Now, there must be something else that's going on behind the scenes that prevented that from happening, or he ended up saying, forget it. I don't want to deal with it anymore. He basically quit on the team.
Yeah.
he didn't quit his job. He quit on his team, and that's even more telling.
Yes.
Because if he would have ended up in third place, I understand. I would understand. Yeah, that's the honorable thing to do if you're a coach that ends up not even having a chance to play into the World Cup. But he quit on that and really ended up throwing a monkey wrench into that situation. And we'll see how Jamaica bounces back. That'll be a very interesting matchup for sure. And I'm not talking about the one against New Caledonia.
Yes, I'm definitely going to do a watch along for that one. So, all the Jamaicans that supported Extra Time TV, I appreciate the love. I was genuinely humbled and surprised by the amount of support. I mean, my target audience it's not limited to Trinidad and Tobago, but I was genuinely blown away by that. So, we'll definitely look into that. And of course, miracles can happen, but, we'll see how it goes. And, I agree with you, just to end things off, Steve McLaren leaving in the way he did speaks volumes, because it sends a message where, okay, I'm done. I don't really believe I could do much more of this team. There's so many, and they're all negative. They're all negative things.
Yeah, no doubt.
Even leading up to the qualifiers, he did not exude that confidence. Now, some may say, maybe he was just being cautious. But, as a coach at international level, we'll use Scaloni for an example. Scaloni is not an arrogant guy, but he does exude a level of calm confidence that you need. Now, of course, comparing Argentina and Jamaica is not the same thing, but it's the same thought process. And I did get that feeling before speaking to Lance and yourself, and I'm outside the Jamaican footballing circles. Just by observing his behavior, I did not get confidence from him. I felt as if I told the other journalists there, I was like, wow, I think we could probably, take out Jamaica in that game, which we almost did. And, this is a guy, you're on the verge of making history with Jamaica. And if that's the message you're sending, I was not entirely surprised. I'm still surprised, but I was still surprised that, he stepped away in the way he did. I thought maybe he would have tried to sugarcoat it a little bit and step down and maybe do something. I mean, he just jumped out and he was done. So,
Oh, yeah. He was, yeah, he jumped out. Actually, if you look at the substitutions for Jamaica, I'll do it from the 67th minute on. Tyrese Campbell, Duwan Richards, Rico Henry. The only and Karoy Anderson. What message did that? And of course, Demarai Gray comes off, Cephas comes off, Burrell comes off, and Russell comes off. What message do you end up getting based on those substitutions?
Yeah, he was just I'm not even Jamaican. I get a headache for them because he clearly was just arrogantly hoping for the best against Curacao. That's how I saw it. We're gonna get it done at home. That's and if we get a result against Trinidad, yeah. If he came there for a draw, and on the surface level, yeah, people were like, he could hide behind that surface level cliche thing. It's good to get an away result. But I'm going to bring this up. I got a lot of interesting, and Lance as well mentioned this. A lot of Jamaicans seem to like Dwight York versus Steve McLaren, which is interesting. Perspective is a hell of a thing, because Dwight York, even though he did not get the results in the end, he went to those away games like, hey, we're gonna try to win. We're gonna try to be proactive. We did not have the talent pool that Jamaica had, although Trinidad has improved. It's nowhere close to Jamaica. But, the fact that he was willing to go to those teams and take it to Curacao and, try to take it to Jamaica. And,
they do twice against Curacao. I mean, what else do you want?
Yeah. And, we could have even snatched it at certain points,
They could have beat Curacao in Curacao.
You could see the intent. And that's why I think right now, the Trinidad and Tobago public is just as, like most national countries that have some passion, generally very unforgiving. And even cynical at this point in time, which is a whole other discussion. And most of the people generally have positive responses for Dwight York. And I'm using this as a comparison to Steve McLaren. Everybody's saying, what, keep him around. We let Dwight York looks like he wants to take us in the right direction, because, as you said, he understands. There's a lot of perks having Dwight York. He understands the Trinidad dynamic, the player, the mindset. He's been there. He's an icon. The players respect him. Versus Steve McLaren, who had let's try to get a draw. He didn't really inspire confidence. And from what I'm seeing and from what I'm hearing from you and many others, he didn't have that. It didn't seem as if he really had that belief that they were going to make it. He thought I was just going to stroll and get to the World Cup, and
Yeah,
it was
he didn't know his opponents.
yes. There was
He didn't know his opponents. It was
came
very
off was
clear.
very complacent and arrogant to me.
And let me not talk so much about Jamaica. I'll talk to you more about Trinidad in this case.
Mhm.
Trinidad teams in the past, when Ronaldo Cephas ends up scoring, I think it was in the 57th minute or whatever, game's over.
Yep.
Game's over.
Correct.
Trinidad ain't coming back from that. But this team ended up really, okay, we're down 1-0. We still got it. We're still in this. And they went, and eventually Kevin Molino ends up scoring in the 84th, 85th minute of the match. So I mean, it's a different. That in of itself is something more that media in Trinidad have to be focusing on that match and how they were able to handle it. And to me, it ends up being a very big positive going into 2030.
Correct. And that's a general consensus of Trinidad and Tobago fans. So, with that being said, Juan, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you here. The reason why I specifically brought you on is because we could have these detailed discussions, and I purposefully had these detailed discussions. I could have had a quick summary and, please the algorithm, and, we just scratched the surface, but I really wanted to get into the deep cuts of these particular topics, into Miami, Argentina, and also Jamaica, and by extension, Trinidad and Tobago. So, like I said, it's always a pleasure to have you here. We'll definitely, have some conversations with you and Lance and everybody else as well when we get to the playoff, the interconfederation playoff. My goodness, that means I need to have dinner just now. We'll definitely have a lot of watch-alongs. And folks, I'd like you to continue to like, subscribe, share. Head over to extvmedia.com. I have, little tidbits that are not the usual posts where I talk about the news. I have my insight as well and my opinions, as well as other guests, contributors as well, Vidya Rampal and so on. Maybe Juan Orango one of these days. Just putting him on the spot there.
Maybe, yeah, sure. Yeah, sounds good.
Yes, because we like to have not different takes for the sake of being different, but have specific opinions by people who are in and around particular fields. And in this particular case, you are the man. So with that being said, folks,
I try.
Yeah, he's being modest, folks. So with that being said, folks, be sure to like, subscribe. We'll be having a couple EXTV live episodes. We'll be doing the new content as requested by the live streamers. Juan, we've been doing weekly shows, live topics, completely uncut, unedited, on the air. The engagement has been insane, so I will continue to do these. And we'll probably do one more because we're approaching the end of the year. And then we'll resume from January, where we have the topics. You all get to choose the topics. You could scan the QR codes, check out EXTV merch, support the channel. The channel has been doing well over the last couple of months, and that's thanks to all you viewers out there. So with that being said, folks, thank you, Juan, and folks, we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching Extra Time TV. Don't forget to like and subscribe.